Wednesday, August 23rd, and this is the Hendrick Hudson Board of Education meeting. Can I have a motion to open the meeting?
Motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, the board will be entering into executive session for the purpose of collective negotiations under the Taylor Law, medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment or employment or promotion or demotion or discipline or suspension or removal of a particular person or corporation, as well as discussing the candidates for the superintendent position. Can I have a motion to move into exec?
Motion.
Everybody said. Can I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, the board will be back at approximately 7 p.m. Good evening. Today is Wednesday, August 23rd, and this is the Hendrick Hudson Board of Education meeting. Let's stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, sorry, we're a little bit late returning, 7:25. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda this evening? Motion. Have a second? All in favor? Okay, before we get going, I'd like to call attention to our wonderful secretaries union. They're here this evening. We've settled a contract with them, and the board is very grateful for your hard work and dedication to the district. So thank you both. Nicole Loretti and Helene Brandt are both here in the audience. Thank you, ladies. Before we get to the audience comment section, I'd like to make a motion to move our presentation, which is section 7 of the agenda, up to above section 6, which is our superintendent's report. All in favor? Carmen, do you have anyone signed up to speak this evening?
We do not.
Okay. All right, does anybody have anything to pull from the consent agenda? Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Right, we're cruising along. I have to, sorry. Okay, I have some donations tonight. We have 3 donations. Caitlin O'Brien has donated a Korg electric piano to the high school music department valued at $600. It's our first donation. And they have the Hendrick Hudson Community Education Foundation has made a donation of $2,399 to purchase a 3D printer for the Project Lead the Way program at the Hendrick Hudson High School. And the third donation is the Office of Special Education has received a donation in the amount of $861 to be utilized to pay for a partial summer camp funding for students with significant handicapping conditions. Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve these donations? Can I have a second? All in favor? Okay, so that brings us to our presentation this evening. It is an update on our strategic plan. We have education elements here in the building with us tonight, which is a special treat. I'd like to call up Lauren and Miriam to start the presentation with us.
Thank you, Alexis and board. We will start with just brief introductions. I'll let Miriam start us off.
Hi everyone, my name is Miriam Cohen and I'm a design principal with Education Element. A little bit about me, I live in Brooklyn, New York. I just moved there a year ago from Chicago, so I'm a little wannabe New Yorker. Prior to Education Elements, I started my career in education as a teacher and then director of high school success at a school in Chicago. And then I got my degree in public policy at University of Chicago.
And I am Lauren Schulten. I am not from New York, as Dr. Laurel always likes to point out my accent. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I've lived in Kentucky my entire life. But I, of course, work for Education Elements and specialize in strategic planning. I was a school counselor for a while, and before that was a teacher for about a decade. Got a doctorate in curriculum and instruction, so had my hands in a lot of different areas, which kind of brought me to strategic planning, because as you know, it covers pretty much everything that involves a school. So that's what brought me here. Particularly, what brought me to Education Elements was the emphasis that our organization puts on community voice in the process of strategic planning specifically. And that has been something that Hendrick Hudson has always prioritized throughout their partnership with us. And so our goal today is to not only do just a quick mapping out of our partnership thus far and what we've accomplished over the years, but then also highlight next steps and pivots that are going to be coming up in the upcoming year. Thank you. So, if you've ever worked with us or seen us present, you know that we really like our acronyms and fun little protocols. So today we're bringing to you one called CLAP. So we're going to first share again the context, which is just the overview of our partnership and why we're here. Then we're going to pause and talk about the lessons that, especially in this implementation phase, that we've learned, and then talk about the accomplishments and celebrate those. And then of course end with what's going to happen moving forward. So we'll start with the context, again, this brief overview. And one thing that I want to highlight, you can go ahead to the next one. Education Elements, we began our partnership with Hendrick Hudson. Oh, I do need to pause and name that our beloved teammate, Ronnie Benjarian, is not with us tonight. And most everyone, not just people on the board, but in this entire community, it seems, knows Ronnie, and he is deeply missed. Ronnie went back to the classroom, and he's given me permission to share this publicly. But he was born in Lebanon and moved to the United States to go to Vanderbilt University, and he's been here for several years, but his visa was expiring. And in order for him to be able to have that renewed, he had to only work at certain organizations. So he's back in the classroom. He's a math interventionist right now. He's very happy. And I sent him a text message when I entered town today. I was like, look, he said, please tell him I love him. So with that, Ronnie, unfortunately couldn't be with us, but he is here in spirit, certainly. And Ronnie, who started this process with you in 2020, has talked to Hendrick Hudson a lot about the importance of being responsive. And you know this, back in, 5 years ago, no one would have ever anticipated COVID, right? And the impact that would have had on our schools. And so that's an easy example to show you the importance of having goals, having a strategic direction that you're headed toward, but also allowing for room to be responsive. And when we started our partnership in 2020 with Hendrick Hudson, the purpose of that school year was to engage the community. So if you'll go to the next slide. We went through, and my eyes are getting bad, so I'm gonna look at my paper here instead of rely on the screen. But we started the community engagement process, and the purpose of that was just to hear from as many community members as possible, not just students and teachers, but also their families and community members, and just take a pulse on where we were. And then if you'll go to the next slide, that led us to the development of our strategic plan. And so in school year 2021, 2022, you can see we did another round of community engagement. We also activated teaming structures because, again, we wanted to include as many voices in our community as possible. This strategic plan was not written by district office. This strategic plan was not written by Education Elements. The strategic plan was written by your community, and that was something that your community in your school district really wanted to prioritize. And Miriam and I have the opportunity to work with school districts across the country, and I use Hendrick Hudson's plan in the early stages of my work in lots of districts as a model strategic plan. And we refer to your community a lot. We refer to this year and the successes that you all had. And first of all, how beautiful it is. But then also the content of that and how strong your pillars are and how they came about. And so this year, we're very, very proud of the work that happened in this school year. And so that brings us to this past school year. So if you'll move forward, this past school year, and this is where we're going to spend the majority of our time tonight, has been in the implementation of the strategic plan, because you can have a really pretty plan with a really cute little girl on the front, and you can be really proud of that PDF, but if you're not putting it into action, what's the point, right? And so this year has been focused on implementation and monitoring. And so we started yet again with engaging your community. And the awesome part about this school year and that community engagement effort, we sent out a survey, we did focus groups, we were able to see year-over-year data and measure any progress there. And that also helped us to set goals for what we would accomplish this school year. And so with that, we we started 4 implementation teams, 1 for each pillar. And we're going to dig in a little bit deeper to what those teams did, but we met in January, March, June, and then actually we're meeting with pillars 3 and 4 tomorrow while we're in town. And those teams were made up of various stakeholders, parents, guardians, teachers, administrators, and again, we'll dig into that work. And then finally, we are looking ahead to the next school year. All right, so our lessons and accomplishments, the main reason that we're here today to give this overview. Thank you. So for pillars 1 and 2, we are going to look at pillars 3 and 4 separately because those pillars are a little different. 1 and 2 are very much, they're the real world experiences in the student engagement. Both of those are things that are happening in classrooms. And so those pillars often work together. Those pillars, implementation teams were made up of mostly teachers, which kind of goes into our accomplishments and lessons in a moment. But again, we met with the pillars 1 and 2 teams 3 times as a whole group. And then of course they did work with their individual schools. So as far as accomplishments of pillars 1 and 2, their biggest accomplishment this year is taking a step back and realizing they needed a shared language for what student engagement actually meant before they were going to improve student engagement, right? And then they also realized student engagement in elementary looks a little bit different than it looks in middle and looks a little bit different in high school. So what are we really going for when we say we want students to be engaged? And so one of the biggest accomplishments of this team was creating a definition for what student engagement looks like at each level. We also were really proud of the amount of parent involvement that happened with pillars 1 and 2, especially as the meetings progressed. At our last meetings in June, we had a lot more parents and guardians who were active in those conversations. Because these pillars are so classroom focused, we did start with mostly teachers, but we saw those parents get more engaged. And so that was a huge accomplishment as well. This is my last section. I'm going to pass it to Miriam. This is a lot of talking. I'm sorry. But the lessons learned for pillars 1 and 2, and again, I framed at the beginning the importance of being responsive, the importance of taking a step back and reflecting like we're doing now, and the importance of pivoting when necessary. And so the pivots that we're going to introduce tonight are a result of these lessons learned. So for the first one lesson that the pillars 1 and 2 teams learned very quickly is, okay, we made our broad goals, our district goals with the strategic plan in the previous school year. But then we started to look, initiative 1A looks a lot different at elementary than it does at middle. And so one lesson learned is having school specific goals in place. And in fact, Miriam and I are going to meet with your principals tomorrow and start working on those school specific goals. And so that is step 1. Also, another lesson, just wanting more participation. We did have more parents involved at the end in those two pillars, but really wanting to bring in more of those voices. And so looking at more participation, and then especially student involvement, having students' voice included in these conversations about what it means to engage students is a good next move and a next step. And so that's another goal that these teams hope to see as we make these pivots. They want to see more student involvement. Now I'm going to pause and I'm going to turn it over to Miriam for 3 and 4.
Yeah, so for pillars 3 and 4, we actually got to meet with the pillar leads or members of the pillar teams to really gather context from their point of view as far as what lessons learned in their mind, what were their biggest highlights and accomplishments, and also even advice that they would give going forward. And that's part of why we're meeting with pillars 3 and 4 tomorrow, is to really think through how to set them up for even greater success in the next years. Now, I know that we have members from both pillar teams tonight as well, so feel free to add to whatever I say. But some of the highlights that we heard from pillar 3 for this past year were around the launch of internships at the high school, and that they're really starting to have high school staff do interviews for that process. And something I think is really great about that is the crossover between that initiative and the pillar around real world experiences as well. And then communication is the cornerstone of this pillar, and so it's exciting to see the different ways that we've made progress in the past year. So some of those would be, they're implementing a FAQ portion for the website, where it's going to be very much community input and driven by sending a Google form to actually see what do families want to know, what are the most frequently asked questions, and then giving them kind of a one-stop shop as to where they can get that information. They also highlighted improved email structures and efficiency as far as being able to filter for different schools. And then, of course, being able to have students and staff know how to participate in PTA and BOE meetings, and being able to really foster increased levels of trust in the community. So that was a huge highlight.
I just want to add, I'm going to add here, just specifically what they're talking about is the move to ParentsWare. That has been in the process of being implemented, and our staff being trained on it. And what the results will be is a much more clean, clear, and efficient way for parents and community members to receive our messages. Dr. Laurel, we actually sent this message out last week. I think we learned in that there's a little tweaking we can do, but we're making great strides. And we're really encouraging in this process that parents download the ParentsWare app, and then they can adjust their notifications. So that's huge, because we were only had Infinite Campus or Constant Contact, or we were going all over the place. That was a big part of that. So
That's amazing. Thank you for adding that. And then lastly, and I think this is a huge win, is the website. And that in itself is an initiative, right? Launching a new website. And so the fact that that is set for early 2024 is really, really amazing. As far as lessons learned, one thing that we heard from, even pillar leads was sort of feeling like there was a lack of, even if you're assigned the pillar lead, a lack of ownership and actually feeling empowered to make decisions and have authority to do so when you're not an official member of the school community. And so that's why we're excited about the pivot that we're making, which we hope will overcome that. And then relatedly, sort of lack of clarity about who is meant to do what within teams. And so that's something that we talk a lot about at Education Elements, is defining the work before you define the people, so that people feel that very clear who's responsible for what, who's accountable for monitoring that progress. And so that's a lesson we love to take away for future implementation as well. And now leading us to pillar 4, last but not least. So pillar 4 really talked about how they feel like they set a strong foundation for future years. And one thing that Lauren and I were talking about was at Education Elements, we really talk about research, discovery, and implementation as phases of readiness for implementing. You can't do everything at once. And Pillar 4 is a pretty lofty and complex pillar with different moving parts around shared decision-making and what that looks like from a district level, from school levels, from elementary versus high school. And so they had different conversations with various stakeholders, and they're really proud of the community engagement that they had to really move into the new structures that we'll talk about. And I know there was a really high level of buy-in and team commitment from that team. And that is just probably one of the most important things you can see in a pillar team is commitment to the pillar. As far as lessons learned, there were some, I thought, interesting ones that came up here. One is just, Hendrick Hudson has a diversity of perspectives and opinions and of course constituents. And so it's important to think through achieving a balance of stakeholders on any pillar team. And one idea that was given to us is if there are to be elections for pillar teams, to consider perhaps an application process in order to make sure that you can have a diversity of perspectives on each team, and that the people with, the largest desire to be a part of the pillar team and the most commitment, as well as of course capacity and strengths that they can bring, that the people with, the largest merit could get on the team. And then school involvement. This was, I think, a big learning for this team was it will look different. Shared decision-making will look different at the high school versus an elementary school. And along those same lines, policy versus practice. There are some things that need to be determined at the district level, and that policy needs to trickle down into schools. And once it trickles down, it will look different depending on, again, the age group. And so something to really think about is how can we tailor this pillar to best fit the context of each campus, as well as make sure that the policy is making its rounds to each campus and that we're communicating about that policy so that, if really amazing things are happening, how do we make sure that everyone is aware of those policy changes? All right, and that leads us to the pivots for moving forward. Again, Lauren spoke earlier about sort of responsive decision-making, and for us, that's a huge portion of that is making pivots and really using what we've seen to improve even for next time. And so that's why today we were announcing the change to shared decision-making teams, which will be site-based. And we're really excited about that because we do think it will then have people with the most contacts in their school buildings and a more cohesion as far as ability to meet and all of these different things to improve. So we're launching those, well, we're introducing them tonight, but we're launching them officially in October. And then our first step, I mentioned earlier, but we'll be meeting with some of the implementation teams tomorrow to really see from their standpoint, what are the recommended action steps for people that are sort of taking the totem pole from them, if you will. And also just making sure that if there is any other advice that we didn't miss any of it. So we're super, super excited. And
I just wanted to say thank you for all your work. And thank you for mentioning Ronnie. He was great to work with. We're glad he's moved on and hopefully very happy. It's not looking a good place for himself. And thank you both for being here. And you have a perfect segue into our policy, which is the shared decision-making policy, which we'll be reading tonight, and that will help everyone explain where we're going with the site-based team. So thank you so much for getting us here. We appreciate it.
Well, and to, go back to what we said at the beginning about how we work with districts across the country, and we refer back to Hendrick Hudson often because of your willingness to not only include that community voice, but then also prioritize pivots and being responsive. And so from our perspective, seeing a team and a board and a superintendent who is willing to say, hey, this isn't quite working the way that it is, or this is a good start, but we know we can do it better, we can do it differently. Being willing to try those things. We have a lot of sayings here, but another one that we say a lot is something is safe enough to try, and you all embody that. And so we have a lot of respect for Hendrick Hudson. We just thank you for welcoming us into. We're not Ronnie, but we do love you all. So thank you.
Thank you.
That was wonderful because I was missing in action the last 2 meetings that we had. So thank you both very much. Before we get on to those policies that we were just discussing, we have a superintendent's report.
I have a couple of items that I think are important to share with the board and the community. Really much in line with the report that we just heard from Ed Elements in terms of community involvement. I want to first just update everyone in terms of what the board is doing with the superintendent search, and just remind everyone that it is moving along. The search committee, which I was part of, presented 5 candidates to the board. The board in the last couple of weeks has had an opportunity to meet those 5 candidates and is in process, as it was this evening, in making a decision to look at some finalists and then have another meeting again sometime in September with them, and then moving forward. So we're on target, we're on schedule. The normal steps that will have to take place beyond the identification of the finalist is doing reference checks and the like. So there's some slow down time there in terms of getting all that done. And of course, with the start of school, we're kind of skipping over the next couple of weeks as a time to, for some of them who have applied, are involved with their own school districts as well as what we're doing with ours. So that's the update, but we are on schedule. We will probably be able to update further the public in September. The second item, again, tying these along, it was like one second item, but it has multiple parts to it, is the idea of getting volunteers from the various, for the various groups that we have mentioned, some tonight and some new. So with the coming up of the discussion and anticipating our site-based teams, both a local one, by building, and an additional one on the planning that will follow from the resolution to the policy today on the district level. So we're going to be anxious to seek parent input and community input on those committees, and more will be announced. My plan is to roll all of this out right at the start of the school year when I know everybody's back, and then obviously from the audience you can tell we don't have many people participating, but I'm sure next month we'll make up for that. I'm sure we'll have people back to normal again. But more importantly are some other new things and new initiatives. I've kind of mentioned to the board, but we've been planning for this for months, and there are things that we have in place, and that's around what I'm going to call I decided that it shouldn't be a committee because those go on and on forever. This has got to be a task force. So it'll be a task force meeting that I'd give it a year, and then the task force can determine whether it wants to continue or not, because it's not something that we should be spending years and years of discussion. It's an immediate problem, and that's all around social emotional needs of our students, K through 12. And so with that, I'm looking for parental input from every grade level in the district, every elementary, the schools, and our middle and high school, as well as getting faculty input, and for that matter, if there are people that are in the community that are just interested in that because of their own backgrounds, like other psychologists and the like that want to join, we're looking forward to having some free advice, but to deal with this issue. So this is an important one for me. I will chair it. We will meet, I would think, quarterly to see what we're doing and make and adjust some of the things that we're doing in the district in order to meet the needs of the students. You mentioned about student involvement, and I'm trying to think about how to do that, but obviously we have to hear from them and at what grade level is it appropriate on an issue like social emotional needs. For sure, at the secondary level and particularly high school, I know that in speaking with the staff, we have issues of bullying that is a major concern. I've received a number of emails over the summer, and so we are looking at various protocols to put in place to help with that situation. So that's a big one for us. Site-based is the other big one. And last but not least, I I said I would do this. I want to give a pitch because let's not forget PTA, and that's an important one. They've been very helpful with the district, and many times we have to go to them because we don't have an appropriate mechanism to reach out to the community. So I don't want people to forget that. That is a traditional role that PTAs have with the district. They've been extremely supportive. I know from even my past experience and our short time here, they're really out there to help whenever they can, and no matter what the dirty work is that you ask them to do, they're willing to roll their sleeves up. So I want to make a pitch as that will roll out, as long as, as well as our special ed septic group, which is always lacking people to join, and I'm going to make a big pitch for that. We spend a lot of time, effort, and resources in terms of delivering special services here, and I'd like to see more people involved with that and more parents involved with that. So that's my pitch tonight, just looking for volunteers and more to come. Stay tuned, it'll probably be in my early letter in September with the details on how to do that. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, thank you.
Can I just add,
Yes, go ahead.
to what you just said about the PTAs? So their membership drives will begin probably now. Their memberships range, I think, in $10 to $15 a person. Students are usually less money, but people just stay tuned for the email from them to join. If you join the PTA, I'm going to sound like my former PTA president self. You do not have to, if you're a member, all you're showing is support for the PTA. You do not have to show up at any meetings or raise your hand. It's wonderful if you do, but they're really looking for members because members, build support for them. So anyway, that's my addition to your plug.
The one I gave the board an update, and I almost forgot on my notes sheet for the public. So this is extremely important. We had set a goal last spring, the board set a goal last spring of making a decision on the framework around what will the district look like, which includes the makeup of the buildings, the distribution of students, and that decision would be made on December 6th. But one of the points the board raised early on was, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get the data? How are we going to get information? How are we engage the public? Very similar, again, to Ed Elements' comments about engaging people because of the criticisms of the past. And I think we've kind of corrected a lot of it. But here's a continuation of that correction. We have now set ourselves up for 3 sessions this fall, one in September. I'll give you some dates. September 20th is the first of our work sessions. Session 2 is October 18th. Session 3 is on November 15th. And then there's a piece of that which will also take place for these groups on the 14th. What we're looking for are committees that consist of groups of teachers and administrators and parents for pre-K to 5 to kind of look at and study in depth some of the concepts that I'm going to speak about that we're going to also deal with in public over those same 3 sessions. And with that, we're going to be looking for volunteers. In that case, we're looking for 1 per grade level so that we'll have 7 parents on it. We're going to be asking for 2 teachers per grade level, so that'll give us another 14. And then our administrative team is another 7, which rounds out the whole thing to about 28. And that group will always meet before the early part of those session days in the morning, probably for a couple of hours. The same team of administrators that I mentioned earlier, along with a consultant, will work in the afternoon for several hours, and then the result of that work, plus rolling out the same thing to the full community, will be a continuation at the Board of Ed work sessions. And those work sessions are again open to the public in terms of sitting in the audience and hearing the same information. We'll be taping it. We hope to give that information out. So in session 1, we're bringing in Maurice Sykes. I'm just going to mention briefly who these people are and what they've done. He's an author and former director of an early childhood center in the DC area, and with a college connection, by the way. He wrote a book called Doing the Right Thing for Children, 8 Qualities of Leadership. I brought it for the board to read. Educational perspectives on early childhood education is basically the general theme from an educational point of view. Session 2 would be with Dr. Oliveria. Margaret Oliveria is the executive director at the Giselle program of early childhood education at Yale Child Studies session. Group, I should call it group. She designs professional development content and training that have direct immediate impact on how educators see and teach children. Her perspective is as a psychologist. She's also going to focus in on the effects of COVID because they've just completed a national study on it. And that's the latest thing that they're working on. All of this has interaction and interplay with what's going on in this school district, and would provide a good background for the board in making decisions, because again, about social emotional needs. And the third session, we have Mr. Bradley Geist coming. He's the Senior Director of Education for the Future. They're a group that works with data, and it's data analysis for continuous school improvement, looking at multiple sources of data to make educational decisions, the kind of thing the board asks for early on, like what data pieces should we be looking at to help inform a decision for our December date. And with that, I'm going to mention publicly, and Wood's going to get a chance to see this shortly as we're working through all of this. They have a set of perception data surveys that we will actually use with our students and teachers and our parents, as well as administrators, which will help provide the data that's used in his 2-day workshop when he arrives here. He'll work with the group on the 14th and the 15th, and work with the board and the public on the evening of the 15th. So that's the other group we'll be looking for people for as well. Thank you.
And you'll be sending out some
Yes.
communication after we all get
So
settled.
this school starts.
Okay, great. So that if you're a parent or a community member and you want to get involved, there will be directions on how you can do that. I just want to thank Dr. Laura for pulling this together at the end of the school year. I think Jen and Erica and I kind of got together and said, how are we possibly going to approach this topic and be prepared to discuss this and make a decision ultimately in December. And we wanted to approach it and hit all angles and educate everybody as well as the board fully. So thank you for pulling in the resources. Knowing who to go to was amazing. Okay, so that was our superintendent's report. And now we're going to move on to our policy readings. I'm going to ask that Erica start with the shared decision-making policy. Usually we would just kind of like tell you what the policy is, start to read it and move on, but I do want Erica to read the guts of this because I think it's really important for the community to hear it.
This is shared decision-making policy 2265. In accordance with the regulations of the Commissioner, CR 100.11, the board has adopted a plan for the effective participation of parents, teachers, administrators, and the board in shared decision-making at the district and building level. The Board of Education encourages the participation of the community in improving education in our schools. The purpose of school-based planning and shared decision-making shall be to improve the educational performance of all students in the school, regardless of such factors as socioeconomic status, race, sex, religion, language, background, or disability. The plan specifies the educational issues which will be subject to decision sharing and cooperative planning at the school level, the manner and extent of the expected involvement of all parties, the means and standards by which all parties will evaluate improvement in student achievement, the means by which all parties will be held accountable for the decisions made, the process whereby disputes will be resolved at the local level, and the manner in which all state and federal requirements for the involvement of parents in planning and decision-making will be coordinated with and met by the overall plan.
Make a motion to waive the further reading.
Second. All in favor? Okay, so Eric, I don't know if you want to give us a little bit more of a summary to it. I think the policy is pretty clear. It's something that our district was in desperate need of. This is a brand new policy. This is not a revision.
This is not a revision. So there's two parts to this. This is twofold. We did not have a policy on the books on shared decision-making. The Commissioner of Education, New York State, does require one, that's my understanding. Legally, we're supposed to have one. So this checks that box, and it's very, very important. But just gonna share that I've been involved in the strategic plan work for since the very beginning. And I think that the reason shared decision-making came to the top for Hendrick Hudson in the first place is likely because this didn't exist. So now we're gonna try to fix that so that going forward, the school district has a plan. It's gonna be tied to this policy, but this policy is just that, a policy. Now the district needs to develop a plan for this policy to be effective and work at the district and building level. So that's the next step in this. And this will be where the new, we develop a site-based team as the strategic plan, where we'll see it actually all come together and work. Yeah.
Great. Is there any questions from the board?
I have two things for the first minute. I have a question. No, in reading this again, I just noticed the typo.
Yeah, I was writing.
And then I do think I read religion, we have to add it. Where? Regardless of such factors as socioeconomic status, race, sex, language, background, or disability, we have to add religion in there somewhere. Okay.
The language background or just language?
I think there's it needs to be a comma, language, comma, background, comma, religion, or disability. Yeah. Anyone else have any? Does everyone have a chance to read through?
So the goal of the plan, once it's in place, is at building levels to make sure that everyone's involved in decision making, and also gives the idea to give multiple people opportunities to be in. So not just anyone if you're on this committee at the school level, that doesn't mean you're always the person that is going to be part of strategic plan or part of the idea is that's they're going to get the funnel of how the people are chosen.
And aren't people on the site-based teams elected?
So we actually, so depends on what how the plan reads. The intention, why don't you chime in, Amelia? Do you want to explain
I was
that?
gonna say, we're gonna do the same thing and look for some volunteers for this, and we were brainstorming some ways that we were going to select, whether it be a random thing, whether it be an application process, but each school would have their own site-based team that was made up of parents, teachers, and administrators, and each one of them would develop goals specific to their building. But that also match what the district wants, but it has to be specific to the building level, so it's gonna look different at every building. And we were talking also about parents that are on there, if they're on it for 1 or 2 years, like at that building, doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna go to the next one, and we can figure out how we are selecting rotating parents.
The suggestion of the PTAs when we met, Amelia and I met with them, was to do this by a lottery. And we are going to have 3 to 6 parents because you always need alternates. And when the topic comes up, one parent might be have more of a, expertise in an area. This doesn't mean that other people that are involved are going to be like locked out of this process. I think from these teams, they're going to do the work to collect the information and the data, come together and have conversations. So, but this will all come from the plan. And we don't write the plan. The board doesn't write the plan. We're just brainstorming. We had to understand how the framework of this might look. And we're hoping to all come together as a group to come up with a plan and how it will work.
I'd like to just add a couple of things. Well, one of the things I want to just make sure there would be, this is not a free-for-all for you to get involved in everything. So understand that the commission's regulations are really around the pillar. It's around student achievement. So everything is around what do we do about improving student achievement in my school. Now, that does mean some of the budgetary decisions of the building are also involved in that. And site-based does have a say in that. And it will vary from building to building, because in one case, you may find that I have a deficiency in, and the other one may find they have a deficiency in something else. The way those two buildings may want to treat it could be different and then should be consistent with the district goal. So that's one point. And the other point I wanted to make was the involvement, and Eric was correct. They would also, I would hope, through PTA be on the agenda of PTA meeting so that there's an update at the building level of what the site-based team is doing within that building through PTA. And then eventually all up to here, and then we would be giving that report out anyway. So just to clarify some points.
So we'll bring this back to the board at the next meeting to read again.
We don't have to vote now. This is the first reading.
Correct.
We look for input next time we go, and then it goes into policy.
Correct. Yep. All right, so our next policy is the first reading of a revision to the opioid overdose prevention policy. This, Jeremy, do you want to read it? No? Eric, do you want to keep reading? Just gotta keep reading.
Do a read from the top here?
So do we, let
You
me
said-
ask a question. This is just maybe a procedural question before you read it. We're really making
Yep.
2 changes. Do we need to read the whole policy or do we just call out?
He has to start reading.
No,
it
I'm
now.
gonna start reading it.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll.
And then we'll do a motion.
You want to explain?
Okay, I'll talk and then Barry can.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think you start down here though.
adopted, the Board of Education recognizes that the use of opioids can lead to overdose and death of district students and staff.
Jeremy's making a motion.
Wait for reading.
Jen, second, all in favor? Okay, so Jeremy, do you want to just explain what so this was the first reading of this, this is quote unquote the Narcan, right, policy. Came up in February, we did a second reading in the middle of February, and we approved it, and it looks like we had to make a revision, so Jeremy, do you want to explain?
Yeah, so when we initiated the policy, it originally required, our policy required annual review of the training. However, the New York State does not require annual training. However, there could be different people in our district who will qualify to be able to administer Narcan. God forbid it's ever needed, hopefully it sits on the shelf, but and they may have different requirements, so to make the policy applicable to any and all people who would be able to fall into this this category, we changed it from annual to in accordance with New York State Department of Health, because right now it's every other year for most people. And eventually it may even become something that you do not even need certification for. I don't know if it's been passed, and frankly, I didn't get the final answer to that yet, but I think it's almost an over-the-counter type of medicine now anyway.
All right, great. So this is you, we have to bring it back.
Carmen, we have to bring this back one more time? Yes. Okay, so we don't have to vote now either.
No, okay. Questions on what Jeremy just explained? Everyone clear? Good. Thank you. So that's it for policy. Are there any committee reports? I know we're just getting started. I'm sure the next board meeting there'll be plenty.
I want to give, I mean, obviously the policy committee's been busy. I do want to give an update on where we are in our process. So we subscribed, the district to a service through NISBA that sends us alerts when, it keeps track of alerting us to new policy that we have to put into place and any revisions to policy, and also if we have to retire policy. Okay, so just to give everyone an idea, right now, I think that number is somewhere around 12 so far that we either have to put into practice or we have to revise. Now, in having these conversations with the policy team, Dr. Laurel and Carmen, we said, well, if this is the case and we just subscribe to this, how many other policies are there that we are out of compliance on? The shared decision-making one was one that had come to the top, and the public will see that there are going to be others. The best way for us to do this and manage it and do it properly is to do a type of policy audit. So we are in the beginning phases of discussing a policy audit that will really clean up and bring Hendrick Hudson up to speed and date on where our policy book needs to be. It's gonna take time on our end to bring them all to the public. You're probably gonna start to see policies at every meeting just to be read. And like you see, if we revise it, we have to read it twice. So it's gonna be probably at the end of every one of our meetings. I just giving the community a heads up and giving the board a heads up. The second part of this is what kind of a deep dive we want to do into the audit. And that is where we have not decided yet. So when we decide that, we will share that with the public, but I would expect we haven't ever done a policy audit that I'm aware of. So we really have to commit some time, energy, effort, and just some funds to this so that we are, compliant. So we're committed to that work. And we just wanted the public to know that. Anything else? Amelia and Jeremy?
Awesome. Thank you for the update. Any board comments and new business?
Oh, I have one thing before you go. We're gonna, just so everyone knows, we're doing walkthrough of the building on August 28th as a board. I think we're announcing it officially.
Yep, we are.
And because there will be 6 of us on site doing tours. So that is August 28th. Just so we know, everyone knows that we'll be doing the board meeting.
And just by way of clarification, because it is a public meeting, if you so wish to follow the caravan, we will be publishing the schedule and you can walk through the building with us if you wish to. That's allowed.
Thank you.
So a quick update that's not a complete update because I don't have the balance of the information yet, but bus patrol. So Dr. Becker, Town of Cortland, Colin Smith, legislator, county legislator, worked with Liz Gillio, who has really been the person who spearheaded this bus patrol, right? She and the person, her counterpart in Somers were able to get the pilot. And we know that report came out last fall that indicated there was this obscene number of incidences where cars were passing stop school buses. So we're one of the only counties that did not have a law allowing this technology to capture the license plate of the person violating the stop school bus law and administer a ticket. So in April of 23, earlier this year, the Westchester County Board of Legislators voted on, and it was signed in by County Executive Latimer to make this an official law. However, it's not yet fully operational. So I spoke with Liz earlier this week. She has reached out to her contact at Bus Patrol, and I'm awaiting an update because there are several people in local and county government that are more than happy to sort of help continue to push this through. So as soon as we get an update from Bus Patrol, I will relay that to the appropriate people, including Dr. Morrow, and we'll continue to try to drive this forward so that we can begin administering tickets. Every one of our buses, except for I believe 2, has this technology already. We just don't have yet the mechanism for it to be disseminated to the county and the county to issue a ticket. So as soon as we get that, I will update the public.
Thank you. Any other new business? Okay. Can I have a motion to close the meeting?
Second motion.
All in favor? Wait, before we go, I just want to mention that our next meeting is on September 6th, the second day of school, at 7 p.m. here at the high school. Thank you.